Hi, this is Sharon Hughes, and I am speaking in reference to our discussion this week on the impact, positive and negative, on the global workforce, as well as a few other questions posed to us this week that I will discuss per slide. The first thing we want to discuss is what is the positive impact on the global workforce. So what are some of the positive impacts of global workforce? There are many, but I'm only going to discuss three today. One of those impacts of global workforce diversity is immigration. Mubarak says that with the migration of workers and migration of employers, the resulting encounter of people from various places, different cultures and capabilities is an important source of workplace diversity. And in a nutshell, what he's saying is people traveling, coming from different places, different cultures into another culture really brings about the diversity of the culture for which they're in. That's a big way of saying that. But if we look at an example, in the U.S. really wouldn't be what it is today without immigration. I think I was reading maybe in Iraq that the U.S. has the highest number of immigrants in any other country, meaning that it is not a melting pot, but a salad bowl, in a sense that there are different flavors, different colors, different creeds, different traditions that all come about and make a very diverse, not only country, but within that country, a workforce as well. The second thing is the rising level of education attainment, which is a great thing. That means that there's been more opportunity for people of all backgrounds or most backgrounds to attain education, more so a higher education, leaving, well, we'll get to the negative bits in a minute, but because there has been a rising level of education, I think particularly really after the housing crash and then more so during COVID and post-COVID, what we now have are more skilled workers available in various backgrounds. The third thing to mention is gender diversity. Women are progressing economically today more so than before due to the diversity of women, not only just working women, but women in higher skilled positions, leadership positions, C-level positions, that sort of thing. And also you're seeing that women are able to work in countries where they were not. And Mubarak points to the Middle East and South Asia and North Africa are some similar areas to where I guess I'll go back. Mubarak mentioned that in those areas that these are areas where it's not the same because women have had or have less opportunities to work because women are not invested in these countries. So that's kind of a negative bit that I probably should put on the next screen, but we are digressing. So I will say that for this, gender diversity is a positive impact as it is increasing the power that women hold in economic status as well as in physical prowess, which is also breaking down cultural taboos on women and our abilities, our physical abilities, our mental abilities, our emotional abilities to hold not only white collar positions, but also blue collar positions. So that has been a plus. Now, discussing the negative bits of the impacts of global workforce, again, choosing three as all three relate to the positives that we just discussed. The impact is increased challenges with fair labor practices, and that relates to our early discussion on immigration, that, it's a great thing that we have this, huge pot of people coming from different cultures and backgrounds, making a workforce very diverse and flavorful. But with that, we're looking at people coming from underdeveloped countries to developed countries. They can be exploited. So we're looking at wage theft issues, working conditions. So these immigrants come in, they're looking for work, they're desperate. They are sometimes forced to work in places that have horrible working conditions so they can take care of their families. Modern day slavery, here in the UK, it's a huge push. I think every company has a modern day slavery clause in their policies, that workers will be paid fairly, that hours will be as necessary for all, that workers will be treated with respect and kindness and not exploited. So that is also a problem. We're looking at immigrants that are coming into, particularly, obviously people moving from, different areas in underdeveloped countries can still experience the same, but more so looking at people coming from underdeveloped countries to developed countries. Also, a displacement of local unskilled workers. So as we just talked about earlier, there is a high level now of more people having attainment to education. And what we've seen with that is that we will now have a low supply of unskilled workers because we're now educating those same workers, which is, again, a good thing. However, what we're losing or what we're seeing is a lower supply of unskilled workers. Again, here in the UK, for a while, they were limiting the visa requirements for more skilled workers, because they had more unskilled workers than skilled workers. That has now reversed, unfortunately, but you're seeing how education really plays a part in the workforce, the global workforce, and how we can quickly go into deficits. When we are offering more education, we lose unskilled workers. When we don't have opportunities for education, we then have a need for skilled workers. And lastly, we talked about earlier the gender diversity, and one of the negatives of gender diversity, speaking particularly of women, is with the increase of gender diversity and cultural taboos, we have an increase of women in the workforce. Women can be economically and physically exploited, as I just talked about in the last slide. And this was an interesting one that I like to mention because I remember this happening personally, was maternity leaves. So here in the UK, there's a lot of jobs that you can find. Particularly, there's a lot of people do a lot of contract work here because it's quite prevalent. Because in the UK, women get 9 months full pay maternity leave. They can take up to a year after 9 months. I believe they get 60 or 70% of pay, and they can take up to a year. That is fantastic news. That when I tell people about it, they're like, "Oh my God, I'm moving to the UK." Which, yes, definitely you should. There's, France and actually Nordic countries are even better. But because of the maternity leave, there was a time, I remember years ago, that because there were so many women acting upon the longer term maternity leave, that there was a shortage of women coming back to work. They were deciding to stay, because I do believe they can stay even after another year and get maybe like half of their salary. And here in the UK, you cannot you cannot be terminated when you're on maternity leave. So they have to hold your job. And the day you get back, you can have a discussion. They might be like, "You were gone so long, we don't need you anymore." But while you're on maternity leave, you cannot lose your job. So because of that, they were having challenges with women coming back to work. And so I remember there being ads and campaigns out to get women to commute So therefore that they wouldn't have to come into the office all the time, that they could commute back, they could work from home, or they commute a few days in. So this is before everyone was working from home. So this was probably 2008, I think it was. And I thought it was really interesting that that was happening, for the simple fact that too many women were on maternity leave and wanting to engage in the longer maternity leave and just not wanting to leave their children. That can be a challenge. So obviously women are child bearers, and therefore if we have fantastic maternity leave uh, uh, benefits, then you do risk the chance of having opportunities where there's um, challenges in filling their work environment. And so that's why now a lot of contract workers, you can find, so they will post it and it will say 9 to 12 months maternity leave cover. And so that's been a huger push now since that particular incident that I spoke of around 2008, which is quite interesting. So what is the purpose of the global workforce? Well, there's many. And I've just listed some here. There's the access to diverse talent. Obviously, I am one of those here in the UK. My visa is a skilled workers visa because I specialize in a particular area of fashion marketing. So I am in technically an immigrant, but more so a visa holder because I well, I don't know. Am I immigrant? That's a good question. So, cost efficiency is another one. Because um, companies can take advantage of lower wages or in the um, I want to say the buying power, I would say, in other countries. So, for instance, the pound is quite high. So, workers in, obviously the Middle East are quite lower. So, therefore, they can take advantage of, if they have a global partnership with someone in the Middle East, and they have a manufacturing company out there, then they can benefit from being able to pay lower wages because the pound is so high, and or because the living environment living environment, I think is what I want to say. It's late, is lower, and so therefore, here in the UK, whereas the average, I think minimum wage is 15 pounds an hour. Minimum wage in the Middle East might be nine dirham an hour. So therefore, that's about, I don't know, 66 pounds, I think. And so therefore, they're able to benefit from that. But what we will find in that is things called wage theft and exploitation too. Market expansion. So obviously, you can expand in different markets when you have people that you can employ in other areas and vice versa. 24/7 operations. I called customer service somewhere the other day and he told me that he was in, did he say he was in Romania? Somewhere kind of far. And so it was morning for him and it was night for me. So therefore operations can keep going, particularly with customer service. And so therefore you can enact these sort of, if we look at customer service again, we can have these 24-hour customer service policies because we're able to hire people in different countries and different time zones. Cultural and linguistic expertise is another one. I think more so now, your companies are looking for people who speak more than one language, particularly because we are such a global workforce societies. And therefore, I'm going to be talking about Nike in a moment. Nike has headquarters in Europe as well as in China and obviously in the US. And so if they can hire someone that can speak different languages, then that person can communicate with teams and partners and clients that are in those countries, as opposed to, again, spending money on translators, i.e. people, or in software. Global collaborations, which I think I've alluded to before, and then innovation creativity, which is, I think, is my favorite, because there's so much that we can gain when we look outside of our box. When we look outside of our little box. So, you know, America is a little box. And so when Americans, you know, companies look outside of that little box and expands out to other countries, the inspiration, the innovation, the creativity that comes about, that you gain from, you know, what might be in these countries, or the minds, or the cultures or traditions, just all the things that you can find when we look outside of our little networks. And that has been something that I personally have gained from. So the last question was to discuss a company and who they are and what they do, I believe is the question. And I went with Nike. I think Nike speaks for itself for the most part, but you know, Nike is an American multinational company. It is comprised of Nike, Jordan, and Converse, and it is the world's largest supplier of athletic shoes and apparel. Nike is involved in design, development, manufacturing, and worldwide marketing and sales of athletic apparel and shoes. They also do accessories, equipment, and services. Nike is quite well known for their innovative technology, for which they don't just use for themselves, but they actually share this technology with others. They have an actual research lab in which they are very proud of. And I found a quote that they said that that Nike believes that they have a global footprint, a culture of innovation, and a team-first mentality. Nike is not just an athletic brand. However, they are a global repository for the science of human performance and potential. As I mentioned earlier, Nike has world headquarters situated in Oregon, as well as in Europe. They have a division. In China, they have a division. And then Converse alone has a division as well, which is housed in the US. So quickly, why did I choose Nike for this to end this presentation? Well, it's because there was an article today that was quite fitting for this particular conversation. Is Nike is under fire for labor rights again. Most recently for failing to address allegations of wage theft, which I mentioned earlier, at two of their suppliers, so in Cambodia and Thailand. So going back to where we talked about, companies can be cost efficient by having warehouses and supply companies, and underdeveloped countries where wages are lower, cost of living is lower, and the money conversion changes. But what we can see is sometimes companies will take advantage of that. Now, this is an allegation, so it's not true, but these are some of the real life things that can happen. Nike has been under fire many of times, as well as Apple. A lot of fashion brands have been under fire with factories that have poor working conditions, that are paying their workers low. I remember Apple years ago had an issue with, I believe, one of their factories in a part of China. Apparently, they worked 7 days a week, and I believe it was like 9 to 10 hours a day. It was something quite ridiculous that they were being accused of exploiting people for these sorts of things. So that is this presentation today on this discussion of the global workforce and its impact, positive and negative, and discussing a company, a multinational company that, you know, may or may not be an example for what we discussed today. All right, thank you so much for listening. Bye.